Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody that is hopefully for somebody. My name is Kyle Naranya. Welcome to episode 129. And on this week's episode, I will be reviewing Love Hurts. Is this the Valentine's Day action movie everybody's been waiting for? Well, you're going to have to listen to the review to find out. There will be a non-spoiler review and a spoiler review, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, totally okay. Time codes will be listed in the description, and to round out the episode, I'm going to be responding to comments, listener mail, and you can find out what next week's episode is going to be. Let's jump into Love Hurts.
Do you think I just woke up one day as a top-selling realtor?
You won the Regional Realtor of the Year award. Congratulations.
No, I had to work for it and stop becoming who I wanted to be.
Aww.
Hiding and living.
This is going to be a very interesting review because I like to think from the Film Realist podcast, there's a bunch of reasons why these reviews should work for general film audiences. One, I don't give a star rating. I mean, I do on Letterboxd if you check there. But star ratings, review score numbers, that's grading every individual film on the exact same curve, which, if you've been a long-time listener, you know that's not necessarily what I do. Here at the Film Realists, when I bring on any of my guests or I'm reviewing a film individually by myself, what I want to do is review the film on its own merits. Is it successful with what it's trying to achieve, whether that be starting something new, a sequel, a continuation, or a complete rebrand of something individually? And it's really interesting because there are films that I would say, if we are just grading them completely on the curve of all films, that are bad. However, what's really interesting is, what are you looking for from the film? Are you going in with any preconceived notions? I try to do my best to not do that myself, but sometimes, obviously, our own personalities, baggage, whatever we bring into a film going experience could be affecting how we perceive any art form whatsoever. It is a subjective medium, and film and television, photography. There are some general rules for what people like to quantify or qualify as good, but other times it's in the eye of the beholder. And I feel that so much with Love Hurts. This was panned fairly significantly. Now, again, I am not one who tends to go to our favorite mushy vegetable, where critics seem to really not like this movie. And I find that particularly interesting, where Love Hurts, directed by Jonathan Esubio, three writers who, quite frankly, I'm not super familiar with, produced by David Leitch and Kelly McCormick, who are behind 87 North. They've made films such as, oh my goodness, I just forgot the Violent Nights, that's what it was called, as well as directed 8711, that's a different studio, Bullet Train, Fall Guy, and Atomic Blonde, and then David Leitch was involved with the first John Wick film. And this new brand of action films that take surprising leads and putting them in extreme circumstances. And for the most part, what's really interesting about those movies is they all fairly consistently manage to have the same sort of tone, cultural identity in the action it's trying to present. To some extremes, that sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. With Nobody in particular, this was a film that definitely leaned more into the just because he's old aspect of what they were trying to do with, my goodness, with Bob Odenkirk. And then that was much more John Wick aligned. Where with Love Hurts, what I found particularly interesting is a movie like this doesn't work if you're not in love with the lead. And Huy Quan, who is an actor who, of course, we all know back from his days in Goonies, Temple of Doom, but because of the way that the Hollywood landscape has evolved minusculely, not significantly, this allowed an Asian actor to come out of retirement win an Oscar with Everything Everywhere All at Once, and his career has been revitalized because of what the steps forward that have been made in the landscape. Huy Quan would not have been getting a lead in the 90s, early 2000s, even in the 2010s. And I'm so grateful for that, because Key's particular timing and his reverence and his attitude in general as a human being is so palpable on screen, and you are just rooting for him to succeed. Now, Jermaine and I, one of my listeners, did have an interesting conversation where it is been a stereotype for a long time that when you are having an action film with an Asian lead, you are putting an Asian actor in martial arts. Whether they are known for them or not, Asian actors in general have been known for martial arts. It is a part of the culture, absolutely, and myself being a biracial Asian Canadian, I did in fact train in martial arts. But interestingly enough, I think my story is very different from somebody like Huy Quan. I grew up loving martial arts because of things like Power Rangers, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Being partially Chinese was not really even something I considered or was put upon me growing up whatsoever. It was pop culture that affected my interest in the martial arts in general, and I trained all the way through to eventually getting my black belt. Don't ask me to do anything now. It'd be much more difficult than when I was training all those years ago. So martial arts are a part of the framework of my childhood and teen years. And Huy Quan is somebody who is also trained in martial arts. Specifically, I believe it's Taekwondo. And this is not something that's new to him. If you watched Temple of Doom, of course he's involved in a substantial amount of the action. And also, when not getting the opportunities to work in Hollywood as an actor, he also worked as a stunt coordinator, most famously on the original X-Men film. That being said, this is not somebody where martial arts are an unknown to them. It might feel like that if you've not followed their career all the way through. And of course, there's a large portion of almost 20 years where he had to go and work in different facets of the industry. So this isn't like Nobody, where we're taking Bob Odenkirk, putting him through his paces, and giving us an action film. And the reason I brought all that up is one of the elements that I found that worked so well in this movie is, as opposed to being the more militant, realistic style of action that we've come to expect from your John Wicks, your Atomic Blondes, your Nobodies. Bullet Train obviously raises the level of believability. It's much more extreme, particularly with its setting being on a literal bullet train. Love Hurts leans much more into Hong Kong wire kung fu of the 70s and 80s that Jackie Chan became famous for. And that having a specifically distinct separation from the other films makes a lot of the action sequences in this so compelling and so fun. Huy Quan's charisma and skill through those action sequences makes each of the different set pieces feel so unique in the action genre. We don't get action comedies like what Jackie Chan made in the 90s and early 2000s anymore. And this film absolutely scratches that itch. Now, if you're going to give me the script to go through in this movie and pick out all the stereotypical, and that's not meaning from a cultural perspective, but the way that this script is broken down into the way that events happen, it's very generic. But while it is all of those things, what I really appreciated was the focus on character, not being so deep that this would be something that would be compelling in an 8-hour Netflix drama or HBO drama, but the joy to which we play with all of the characters' relationships, that we explore aspects of their love lives for no reason other than entertainment, provides that. I saw this with Chris, and our joke was this was our Valentine's Day date from our wives, seeing this on the week before Valentine's Day. But We were laughing at all of the comedy beats in this movie. Anytime we spend the movie away from the main of Marvin Gable, Lee Ki-hee Kwan's character, there's a particular relationship that I don't want to spoil in non-spoilers that is so ridiculous, but the movie is completely aware of its absurdity, and it manages to ride that line so effectively that we were smiling from ear to ear for the entire movie. Now, that works for us. My evaluation of Love Hurts was not going to be putting it up with the best action movies of all time, the best romantic comedies of all time, or the best comedies in general. This is such a Venn diagram of a bunch of different things, and it manages to succeed in all three of those aspects. The action in this works. Like a lot of other modern action films we've had recently, it gives us a new cool weapon that I'll get into in spoilers. The comedy, for the most part, works. There are some duds, for sure. But the simplicity of this is a movie that, while not necessarily required to see on the big screen, will do so well on streaming for its precision in its unique quality. Having somebody who scratches scratches the same itch of the films that a lot of us would have grown up with Jackie Chan, shows why it's an unfortunate circumstance of the industry that Huy Quan was not present for the early 2000s. He is absolutely somebody who would have nailed something like Shanghai Nights or Shanghai Noon. That specific quality of action comedy is something we don't really have anymore. And while I'm certain that this is going to be a box office bomb, I need more Huy Quan in Hollywood, because he's somebody who just lifts up my spirits. And if you're not going to entertainment, whether that be a theatrical film or a streaming TV show or a play, just filling yourself with joy, and particularly being somebody who grew up with him, watching Temple of Doom over and over. It's one of my favorite Indiana Jones movies. Maybe one day I'll rank them, or I might have already. You're going to have to go through the archive to find out. I adored watching this movie. Now, is it rewatchable in the sense of those action films that hold the test of time? Probably not. But as a Valentine's Day action comedy, this is a win. Absolutely. Would recommend watching it, probably mostly on streaming. If you want to rush out and go support it in theaters, you can absolutely do that. But I had a grand old time with this, and I can explain why in spoilers.
The Reavers called about the Emerald Springs house. They're such freaks, but they want to take a look at it.
Great, schedule it. After today's open house, I think it's going to be competitive.
Yeah.
So Marvin Gable is, interestingly enough, we're in full spoiler, so no need to worry about this, but that's his name just in the whole thing. He doesn't have an alternative ego, which I found also kind of interesting, which makes it even harder for his disguise to work. These are the kinds of things that suffer from what we like to call fridge logic, which is, if you give it any thought whatsoever, the plot doesn't really add up. But regardless, so Marvin was a muscle for his brother, who is Knuckles, also named as Alvin, and he was the muscle for him in this very small crime organization. Looks like it runs out of Chinatown in their particular area. It doesn't seem like it's worldwide or whatnot, and that probably comes down to the fact that the budget for this was only about $18 million. And somebody was I believe Rose is supposed to be their lawyer, played by Ariana DeBose, who stole money. And if you steal money from Knuckles, aka Alvin Gable, you're killed, because, it's mob bosses. There are elements of where they say these things over and over again. It's like, yes, we get it. We understand what the stakes are for stealing from the mob boss. What else would it be besides death? Anyways, and Marvin, as you would have heard in the clips, has hidden and become the best real estate agent in his area. We see a lot of the setup for this, which is, you know what? this I do appreciate that in order to have action sequences in places where there aren't any people, we go to these open houses. So we have all that set up where we can just go to these random places and not need to worry about where the action would be civilians and whatnot, meaning you don't actually have to have a lot of extras in this. This movie has, I think, 12 people. I'm just going to look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Look at that, 12. And it's really funny that way. It feels much more like a really expensive TV pilot. And that's not a criticism. There's a lot of incredible television pilots. The movie does really want to drive into your head that it's on Valentine's Day. Something that I really appreciate that it does do with that is it is part of the story. This isn't just, oh, it happens to be a Valentine's Day, we're not really going to address it. Violent Night obviously was completely Santa related and Christmas set. So this having love be a part of the backstory of it is an element of the story. There is something I want to address just because it did, and I don't even like the fact that I want to say this out loud, but I'm going to anyways. The microphone is running and you're here to listen to me. Thank you very much. I do greatly appreciate it, which is that Huy Quan in actuality is 53 years old. Ariana DeBose, who is his love interest, is 34. That is obviously a substantially large age gap. Now, I will say, Key looks maybe 45. He is aging incredibly well. So, but there is a age gap that is noticeable. It's not nearly as, it doesn't look as significant in the film, but it is still a substantial gap. Anyways, that is the driving force for why he left the quote-unquote company, and because he chose to be the person who was going to kill Rose for stealing the money, and he let her go. Thus hasn't seen her forever, but she decides because, and interestingly enough, I'm kind of going back and forth, and apologies for that. The film is only 83 minutes long, that being an hour and 23 minutes. I would have preferred if we spent more time with Rose in the background of what's going on in the movie, this allowing that for the investigation she has clearly been doing to put all the pieces together as to why she was found out, where did that money go. She has all of this information in her apartment that we see later, but it's not shown to us how she achieved that information. She just sort of has it. And because of that, that's where I feel like we could have improved the movie in having some more, not exposition, the opposite of that, quite frankly, which is showing instead of telling us. But Marvin is succeeding so well as a real estate agent, eventually realizing that not realizing, it's kind of just in your face. He receives a Valentine's Day card from Rose. She has also sent them to all the people who would be looking for her, or assuming she was dead, this kind of setting all of the things in motion, starting with the very first fight with the Raven, who is played by Mustafa Shakir, who people would mostly know from Luke Cage in season 2 as Bushmaster and as Jet Black in the live-action Cowboy Bebop. And each of these action set pieces that we do have, that being the first fight, is really fun, where it's set in Marvin's office within the real estate agent office. He's got iced out windows, so you're not seeing what's going on. But in terms of the setting all that up, one of the elements of realism not being a part of this is that, and you can see it in the poster, the main poster for this, the theatrical poster, the one that I currently have behind me is just one of those heart candies, is that he gets stabbed through the hand quite severely, and it doesn't really come up. He just sort of wraps it. And I know that's to show he's not invincible and add a little more believability to his vulnerability, but that's I wouldn't have been able to function. I just would not have been able to do that. And that fight scene's quite fun, where he is always trying to hide the noise from outside to the rest of the office. And after that, Raven, I'm not sure if the movie tries to show us that he's been killed or just knocked unconscious, because he does smash his head on the desk, but Marvin does throw a pillow under for him. And when I talked about the providing a focus on things you don't have to do whatsoever. Raven, who is revealed to be knocked unconscious, is discovered by Ashley, who is his assistant. She would be known most, her Leo Tippin, from Crazy Stupid Love. She plays the babysitter in that film. And the relationship between the two of them, she's somebody who's clearly suffering from depression, no self-worth, kind of in the spiral of feeling like her life is not working out, and Marvin being the eternal optimist. And I can see why they went to Huy Quan for this, is saying like, you need to do what's best. You have to think about changing your life and all this optimism. You can do that every single day and things will be different. And she's just kind of like, yeah, okay, Marvin. But the fact that she discovers the Raven, and this is a pre-established element of his character, which is he's writing poetry when Marvin enters his office and discovers that he's there. And the fact that she sits down and finds his poetry journal and starts reading through them, realizing this guy's perspective is exactly the same as mine. And we get multiple scenes of these two characters going back and forth over the poetry that he had written, but nobody's ever understood what I feel. And completely, regardless of the fact that he's a murderer, Ashley just feels like she's found her kindred spirit. And this subplot that could be so bad is so funny because the conversations delivered between these two characters are done with such earnestness that you're invested in this ridiculous relationship. And I love that this is the B plot of the movie. The A plot, of course, as I've established, is the reignited relationship between Marvin and Rose. And I like Daniel Wu as Knuckles. I think he's a compelling bad guy. People would probably know him from American Born Chinese and most famously Into the Badlands, where his character clearly has the very Americanized gangster aesthetic to him. And something that I love, which is you're going to make a compelling villain, you got to make them have a thing. And this guy loves bubble tea, aka boba, and is eternally unforgivable because he uses a boba straw to kill Sean Astin, who is Huy Quan's boss. He's Marvin's boss. And of course, this is a Goonies reunion, which just warms all of our hearts that these kids are now friends in their middle-aged hood. And I absolutely love that. And such as Boy Kills World, John Wick with the pencils, Love Hurts has a boba straw as a weapon. So he kills Sean Astin directly through the eye. Has to have been somewhat inspired by Die Hard 2, Die Harder, where the icicles are used as weapons, which is one of my favorite kills in that whole franchise. And the use of that is not used just in that fight, but Knuckles, Alvin, Marvin's brother, does use it multiple times in their final fight sequence. I don't think the movie's action sequences are as exciting as some of the things we've had from the other films, but as I mentioned in non-spoilers, having a more kung fu wire aesthetic, not being insane where people are running up walls, but increasing the level of damage from the fight sequences where Key, because of his stature, punches somebody and they go 3-4 feet. I like that element in this, increasing the extravagance of the fight scenes, but a lot of them are very small set pieces just in terms of where they are taking place, usually just inside buildings. There's only about 3 or 4 sets in the movie. We have a very minor car chase sequence, but the budget of this is felt in those areas, which would be a criticism that I would have for the movie. But each of them is unique, where we get to have, Marshawn Lynch is in this movie. So yes, that is kind of the level of performances you're going to get from this movie. He does yell beast mode, which as a football fan, I found quite funny. And just to completely date this episode, the Super Bowl is happening right now, and I am somebody who is happy that it is 37-6 currently for the Philadelphia Eagles. If that changes, and by the time I'm done recording this, they've lost the game to Kansas City, that would be the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history. But we'll see, because I haven't done mail yet, but I think it'll be really funny, particularly Keen Machine. I really hope you're listening to this. Maybe you'll be happy by the end of the episode. Maybe you'll be sad. You're going to have to let me know in the comments. I like doing that with the episodes. I think it's fun. So yeah, Love Hurts offers a lot of variety that you don't necessarily get, particularly from February films in general. January and February are typically where movies go to die. As I said in non-spoilers, is this necessity for the big screen? No. But if you're somebody who wants to go out for an hour and a half, see something fun and original, Love Hurts offers all of those things that I'm looking for, particularly in the action genre. Could the script be more in-depth? Definitely, but it's so fun, and I had such a grand old time with this. I'm not going to be rewatching it anytime soon, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be a movie I'm going to recommend. So that will do it for Love Hurts. Let's jump into question of the week, listener mail, and comments, and what I'll be reviewing next week.
Can I ask you a question? Just one?
There's something I've been meaning to ask you.
I ask the questions, you answer the questions.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it.
Last week's question of the week was, what is your favorite Marvel trilogy? Stephanie wrote in, my first instinct is to say the 2000 X-Men trilogy featuring the iconic Hugh Jackman, but I'll say that the Thor trilogy holds up pretty well too. Unfortunately, The Dark World doesn't have enough oomph for me to say that trilogy was amazing / the best, but if you put any one of the early 2000s X-Men's movies, I'll gladly drop what I'm doing and watch. Dylan Pollock of Movies to Watch Before You Die says the movement kills me. It looks like slow-mo. He's talking about Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Favorite Marvel trilogy, I think you have to go with Captain America. That's definitely the highest quality one. Angus wrote in, Captain America, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Avengers are the only acceptable answers. Which, Angus, I don't want to be that guy, but there are 4 Avengers movies. We have Avengers, Age of Ultron, Infinity War, and Endgame. And eventually we're going to have 2 more, which is 2 more trilogies, although we got a 4 and a 2-pack, which I especially find very funny. And I wanted to talk about a video I put up that I'm really proud of, which was going through the entire history of Spider-Man in animation form. And I asked which episode or which Spider-Man series you watched growing up. So David Brown, 5969, said Spider-Man the Animated Series is the best. I Am Tony Baloney said Marvel Spider-Man is leagues above Spectacular and Ultimate Spider-Man. Totally disagree with that, Tony. I love this one here, which is Oath_PT, SpongeBob. I grew up with SpongeBob. And then there were a lot of comments about the Ultimate Spider-Man, but that's fine. On to Anton Solo said the original series was my first one, still the best one. That was one I did watch a ton when I was a kid before hockey practice. It was on very, very early. This one I had to point out, which was Dylan Mo30C said, my name is Dylan. Not the one I'm talking about, Dylan, but I appreciate that. And there was a lot of comments about the Spider-Man the Animated Series, and then some love for Spectacular Spider-Man, which, of course, somebody sung the song, which I appreciate. I can't find that one off the top of my head, but it said Spectacular Spider-Man, which is absolutely amazing, and why I think it's the best. Oh, here was one. Pugy4836 said Spectacular Spider-Man was goated. I've watched the whole thing like a dozen times. Totally agree. Absolutely love that series. Now, to this week's question of the week. We're going into, so obviously cards on the table. Captain America Brave New World is going to be next week's review. And there's a lot of talk about the MCU, particularly before Deadpool and Wolverine, that the MCU is not where we would like it to be, or people are not excited about it anymore. So I'm going to put some optimism into the expectations for Marvel Cinematic Universe in 2025. So that's my question. Which Marvel movie in 2025 are you looking forward to? We have trailers for all of them. By the time you hear responses to this, one of them will have come out, but we do have another trailer for Thunderbolts, and we finally have a trailer for Fantastic Four: The First Steps. So that's the question. To answer, you can, of course, comment on YouTube and Spotify. You can email the podcast, filmrealistpod@gmail.com, or at the Film Realist on any of the social medias. All those links are in the link tree, and I look at everything. I may not respond to everything, but I do look at everything. If you enjoyed the podcast and you share it with friends, I appreciate you. If you really loved it and you would like to have the podcast get to the next level, the podcast is growing, the listener base is expanding, and it's really amazing to see all the positive responses to the, I don't want to call it content, but that is what it is that I put out there. Please give the podcast a subscription on YouTube or the social medias, as well as give a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I would greatly appreciate it. There is a number that I need to hit for something that I'm trying to do behind the scenes, but don't worry, it's not going to negatively affect the show in any way if you don't want to do that. My name is Kyle Naranya. Thank you for listening to the Film Realist podcast, and I will see you next time.